Welcome back to Kaulig Nation, your one-stop shop for all things Kaulig, Dinger, SVG, and more. And based off that last video that you got from us, we figured it was appropriate to do an update video of sorts on where we think this might be going, because the musical chairs continue in NASCAR, and then Chris Rice issues, or public interaction. I don't want to call it a statement. And I think we have a chance to dive into what we think might be going on with Kaulig Racing on the Cup level and the Xfinity level. But before we get there, our multiple choice question for this video is, which two of these drivers do you think will end up with Kaulig in Cup or Xfinity next year? Our options are Christian Eckes, Shane Van Gisbergen, aka Mr. SVG, Sam Mayer, Zane Smith, Corey LaJoie, Ryan Preece, Harrison Burton. If you had to pick two of these guys to end up with Kaulig, who do you think they'll be? Comment down below. We would love to hear your thoughts there. Joining me as always, partner in crime. I call him Mr. Glass Half Full. I think it's fair to say I'm usually glass half empty. Ryan, what's going on, buddy?
Oh, man, not too much. Happy to be back. It's always fun when we get to have some interaction, on other forms of social media. Recently we got an opportunity to have a brief interaction with Chris Rice. I've interacted with Denny Hamlin before. It's pretty exciting. I'm glad that, our message, our voice is being heard in some capacity. Is really cool. It's really exciting. So hopefully everyone that's watching, listening, continues to enjoy what we have to say, because everything we do here is Kaulig centric, and we really, really want what's best for everybody. So I'm super excited to talk about free agency here this episode.
So this graphic here looks like we're getting ready to have a Kaulig Royal Rumble. But I mean, in a way, I guess we kind of are. But let's dive into what led to this video. We'll take a brief look back at it. We interacted with Chris Rice. We mentioned in our last video, he said, hang tight and stop not believing, and then doubled down on that by liking my tweet that had said, tonight Chris Rice told me to hang tight and stop not believing. I've been a Kaulig fan since the day they brought AJ back. I want to believe this means they have some positive changes in store. We put out Kaulig content weekly like no other channel does for our love of the team. Once again, if you know of another Kaulig channel, please list them down below. We would love to reach out and interact with them, and maybe even do some content with them. It'd be fun. So that leads us to 2025, man. Seats are filling up. The Spire thing's out there. They have McDowell and help me out here. Hocevar locked up next year, so they have one seat open. Trackhouse more than likely has one seat open. I think that's it. I mean, Kaulig, technically both seats are open. That seems to be it that I recall in terms of Cup Series charters with available seats. I could be forgetting one. Rick Ware might have one open, but that would be bad news for them.
2311 will have one.
2311. Well, we do believe that's Riley Herbst. Everything
that should be Riley Herbst, yeah.
And I'm curious to see how that'll play out and how he will do in like really, really excellent equipment. He brings sponsorship, obviously. We'll dive into Riley in another video or bonus content of some sort. By the way, if you haven't yet, like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications to all to keep up to date with all of our content. Let's start with the Cup Series, man. Currently, Daniel Hemrick and a slew of drivers. Daniel Hemrick in the 31, slew of drivers in the 16, although it seems like it's basically mostly AJ for the rest of the year, with some pop-up appearances from SVG and Ty Dillon. I don't think anyone else is slated to have any other races in the Cup Series other than those three, and most of them seem to be AJ the rest of the way. In terms of the Cup Series, man, first, give me, if you were a betting man, you're throwing $500 down. You got a chance to win big. We'll say 20-1 odds. Who are you picking for those two seats? So not who you want, who are you betting on are the most likely names for those two seats?
It's brutal, man. Brutal. It's tough, right? And there are reasons I could go with so many choices. The first, to me, the easy one, my probably low odds option here is AJ Allmendinger. At this point, homerism aside, AJ Allmendinger makes the most sense. I touched on it briefly in our last video. It looks like NASCAR is adding 2 additional road courses back to the Cup Series. That puts them up to 7, I think, right, is the number there. That gives you 7 bullets with AJ to make the playoffs.
Theoretically,
6, I guess.
Or if one of those cities really blew them away with a street course offer.
Yeah, I don't think they do that. I think they're going to probably stick with 1 street course, whether that's Chicago or elsewhere in the future. We'll see. But nonetheless, there's going to be at least 5 regular season road courses, maybe 6, depending on where Watkins Glen falls, to get into the playoffs. We've already seen AJ for the last several years. He steps into that 16 Cup car and he simply performs. Like any driver, he has his off weeks, but week in and week out, he is constantly putting that car comfortably inside the top 20, usually top 15. The results are not questioned at this point that Allmendinger is the right guy. I think they've figured out a way to put him in the car. I think that's the easy pick. The second driver, this is tough. There's just so many spinning doors here at this point. I am going to put my money on Zane Smith still. And I say that for a few reasons, because as you touched on, I do trust Bob Pockgrass a lot. He seems to have his, ear to the ground. He knows what's going on, right? And while the Spire situation was shocking, nobody saw Corey LaJoie losing his job. I don't think that had to have been a huge shock to the entire industry. He is now linking Justin Haley as the replacement there. Somebody that's driven for Spire in the past. He has a win with Spire. Justin Haley would make a lot of sense there. At the end of the day, I think there is we're getting to a hot point with Daniel Suarez. He has not signed a contract with Trackhouse. And we were talking about this way back in March, late February, after he won at Atlanta. Daniel Suarez is locked in at Trackhouse. That contract is not signed. And week after week that it doesn't get signed, the hotter that seat's going to get. And, if there's a strong possibility that Suarez becomes the odd man out and both SVG and Zane Smith go there, right? There's so much. But I do think, assuming that the dominoes fall the way that, I think they're going to fall, Zane Smith is going to be looking for a Cup ride. Kaulig has that availability. I think it's going to be AJ Allmendinger and Zane Smith in the Cup Series.
Last video we talked about the whole believe concept in terms of what Chris Rice had said to us, just believe. So I'm going to put my fake $500 down on the table with Chris Rice's believe concept in my mind. Don't you dare make me lose this fake 500, Chris. And I'm gonna put AJ Allmendinger and Christian Eckes in the cars. And the reason why I say Eckes in the Cup Series is I think at some point, look, I love Kaulig, but at the moment, I think even they would have to, and they might not admit it publicly, they're not a destination at the moment. A couple years ago, they were. Right now, they're not. So if the difference between getting Eckes and not getting Eckes is getting him in a Cup ride, then I think you do that to get yourself a blue chip prospect that you go, hey, the next 3 or 4 years, this might take some time, but we're going to put some, funding behind this guy. And I don't think Christian brings much of his own funding. But I'll tell you what, learning from AJ Allmendinger is not a bad thing to do. SVG's been doing it this year in Xfinity. So that is where my money is going there. And really it came down to Christian Eckes or Daniel Hemrick for me. I think the Spire thing has Zane Smith written all over it. I hope not. I'd love Zane in Kaulig. I love Zane in Kaulig, especially if he was a Kaulig guy and not just a lone guy. Hell, you could even convince me that Zane Smith, Christian Eckes would be a fun Cup pairing for Kaulig for years to come, and AJ just drives part-time in Cup and stays down in Xfinity. You could sell me on that. But for me, it came down to Daniel Hemrick or Christian Eckes because of there's just not enough clarity on where Circle stands, whether it's with Kaulig or whether it's with Hemrick, right? So money
talks. And I will say that I know over the last month we have I don't want to say disrespect Daniel Hemrick, but we have kind of ignored Daniel Hemrick, and that's not fair to Daniel Hemrick. I agree with you. I think there is a strong possibility that he gets to stay in that 31 car if Circle sponsorship stays with him. And I know we've debated over the last couple of weeks, maybe Circle starting to shift more to AJ, which is certainly possible. But, you can't, it's hard to look past the incumbents. And while Daniel Hemrick he has no contract at the end of this year. He will be a free agent. You kind of go with who you know in some instances. I do think the odds of Hemrick staying in the Kaulig car are definitely higher than we've given some credit for. But I do think Kaulig is looking to make a big jump in performance. And we've seen it time and again. Hemrick is just a safe play. And with Christian Eckes, I would be okay with that. I think he has a lot of talent. That jump from trucks to Cup is tough, but it could happen. But good call on Hemrick. I do think there's a strong possibility we'll be talking about him staying.
Yeah, I don't know if it's strong, right? It all depends on, if Circle's willing to sponsor someone else. Like, are they willing to be on AJ's car a bunch? And it doesn't mean Hemrick's out of the organization. Like, if I'm Daniel Hemrick and my options are bottom feeder team, even worse than Kaulig's been, or going down and being the number one Kaulig Xfinity car again, I might seriously be looking at that. I would like to see Daniel back with Kaulig's Xfinity team and him and AJ almost swapping spots. I'm not saying AJ to the 31. 16 is AJ's number now. He's kind of married to it, other than when he runs the 13. Keep him in the 16. But yeah, I don't think it's best for Kaulig Racing, though, for Daniel Hemrick to be in a Cup car any longer than this season. But again, money talks, and if they've been waiting on that charter deal to finalize things, it's a mistake because they don't have any leverage, and it's unfortunate. And Ryan and I have a big video, a longer video than what we normally do coming out on that if you're a fan of teams like Kaulig, Trackhouse, Rickware Racing, anyone really, you're going to want to tune into that, because if you're not one of those big, massive teams, the deal's really going to affect you. So tune into that video. It's coming. Let me ask you this. Let's put your fanboy hat on. Ryan steps in for Chris Rice. Chris calls you one weekend and wants you to make the decision. Give me your two sets of pairings for Kaulig. I mean, I guess there's always the possibility they run into another charter, but I don't know if that'd be wise for the team at this point, especially not without another investor. But give me your two sets of Cup pairings that you would want to see in there. So I'm not going to limit you to one. Give me two.
All right. Well, I'm glad you gave me the option, because there is something I do want to touch on ever so briefly, and we haven't talked about SVG at all, really, the last video or this one. And again, the Trackhouse deal is so wide open that's really going to make a lot of decisions, I think, for Kaulig. But the same deal with Daniel Hemrick, right? I'm sorry, Daniel Suarez not signing his deal. The fact that SVG has won and won and won at all these Xfinity road course races, I was expecting Trackhouse to come forward fairly quickly and say, yep, SVG's our guy. SVG is going to be driving Trackhouse next year. And every week that goes by that he is not announced as a Trackhouse driver is an extra week that I'm think that maybe there's an opening for him potentially going to Kaulig or staying at Kaulig. Again, I think it makes sense for him to go to Trackhouse. I think that's where he will end up. But the longer this drags out, we saw this with Kaulig last year as it drug out longer and longer and longer, even after AJ won at the Roval, right? They didn't announce him as a Cup driver. If when you win and you don't get announced, something's fishy there. So to the point, my fantasy all in, what I'd love to talk to Chris Rice about would be a combination pairing of AJ Allmendinger and Shane Van Gisbergen. You put those two in a cup car for 2025, and you are, I won't say guaranteeing a win at a road course, but you are damn near guaranteeing you're going to win somewhere on a road course, and you are putting your organization in the playoffs. And I truly believe this, and my heart, that with AJ and Shane mano a mano on the same team, they would push each other hard. Like, they would make each other better, because they're both similar age. They're both older. They both have a lot more driving experience, and they're both at the top of their game. And we've seen with Shane that he is adapting really well to cup or to ovals. So my dream pairing would be AJ and Shane. A second pairing that would be that I would be okay with, going the opposite direction, going young, would be Zane Smith and Sam Mayer. I think of the young crop that's coming through the Xfinity and the trucks. They have a lot of potential. They have both proven themselves. They've won a lot of races. Sam Mayer has kind of made a few enemies recently, but he's still really talented. And I think you give him an opportunity at some road courses. He might not adapt immediately, but I think he gives you a great opportunity to win there. So those would be my two pairings that I would be, going either older or younger. I'm throwing my dice in on those names.
That's the other team that has an opening, Front Row. So there is another one. So you got Front Row, you got Spire, you got Trackhouse, and you got Kaulig. That's 5 openings. We'll see what happens. You stole my first one. I think there's a case to be made with AJ and SVG. Look, we're going to be doing a video. Our next video is a deep dive into SVG stats. And I don't know if I'm as positive as Ryan is on the SVG oval stuff. And I think there's some stats to back that up. But it's his first year. I didn't expect him to, light the world on fire. And I do think that could be part of the reason why Trackhouse hasn't jumped at putting him in the car yet. There's some glaring stats on certain track types that are not very good for him right now. And we'll dive into that in our next video. But I would still, I'd be married to Allmendinger and SVG. It'd be a ton of fun to watch. Great guy to learn from. And look out the rest of the field on road courses. Have fun with that. Not to mention both guys can go down and race 5 Xfinity races a year too. So, I would assume SVG would take 5 of the road courses, and AJ would take 3 and pick a couple of other races. Nashville being one. Who knows with what else? I'm going young too. My young driver lineup's a little different than yours. I'm going with one of the ones I bet on as a possible chance, and that would be Zane Smith and Christian Eckes. I think. Again, I think to get Eckes in the fold, I don't think he's going to take a Xfinity ride with Kaulig. Hope I'm wrong. I just don't see it happening. He probably needs to have the Cup ride with a few years on the contract. It would be a pair that I would have to learn to be patient with, but I also have no doubt that Matt Kaulig would run AJ Allmendinger at every road course in Cup anyway. So you'd still have your trophy hunting number 13 car. 13 is my favorite number. We'll go with that. We're going a little long on this video, so we're going to trim down our Xfinity one here and be a little quicker with it. So this is what I would say for the Xfinity, dude. Let's do your Xfinity, what you think is likely. However, you have to base that off of what you think was likely from your Cup. So whatever your main Cup prediction was affects what your Xfinity prediction is. And then give me who you want down there.
Yeah, it gets a little bit more murky on the Xfinity side, because I think there's quite a few Cup drivers going down, which kind of opens some doors. At the end of the day, we know Josh Williams is going to be back. So there's one. I actually think Kaulig is going to expand to 4 full-time Xfinity cars. Right, wrong, or indifferent, I kind of see that's where they're going. So I think Daniel Dye is also going to get a full-time opportunity in the Xfinity series. Now, I also believe that I think it could be either one. I'm going to lean towards Ryan Preece getting an opportunity to anchor the Xfinity program for Kaulig. He's going to have to take a step down. I know he's kind of been a Ford driver in the past, but he's proven that he can win at the Xfinity level. I think Ryan Preece is the driver that they go get to be a full-time replacement basically for Allmendinger in the 16. And then I actually also think Harrison Burton. I really feel like Kaulig is going to put their money where their mouth is and invest in potentially rehabbing a couple careers. And I think Harrison Burton was really good in the Xfinity Series with Joe Gibbs, went up way too soon. So I think you're going to see a lineup of Ryan Preece, Harrison Burton, Josh Williams, and Daniel Dye for Kaulig in the Xfinity Series.
Now, what do you want to be the Xfinity lineup?
What I want would be Ryan Preece, or Chris Eckes. I'm actually okay with it. I'd like to see Daniel Dye. I really think he's got some potential. And Josh Williams is going to be there.
So my most likely Cup lineup, if I recall correctly, was AJ and Eckes. I thought that Kaulig might bite the bullet and, put him up in Cup and go with the growing pains, which I still think would be a smart move. You got to gamble on someone. You don't have blue chip prospects right now. So if it's AJ and Eckes in Cup, then I would place money on, and I'm going off just 3 cars. I don't know if they'll expand to 4. But I would go with Daniel Hemrick, Daniel Dye, and Josh Williams. That's where I would bet. But my hope would be if the Cup drivers are Allmendinger and Eckes, that you get someone like Harrison Burton down there with sponsorship. I do think a team like Joe Gibbs or Junior Motorsports might poach him because of the sponsorship, similar to Chandler Smith. I don't know if Joe Gibbs would go down the Harrison Burton route or not. Sponsorship money, and Harrison brings some of it. So, but I think adding Harrison Burton to that stable with Daniel Dye gives you a couple of young guys and Josh Williams. And then if Kaulig goes young in Cup with Zane Smith and Christian Eckes, then I'm going with Allmendinger, Hemrick, Josh Williams, and a 4th guy, whether it's Daniel Dye or Harrison Burton. So as much as I would love SVG to stay, I think at the end of the day, he is going to get one of those Trackhouse rides. But the longer he goes without one, the more it remains an option for him to go and race with Kaulig again. So check out our next video, though. Deep dive into SVG's stats this past season, or this season so far. We dive into basically every stat you can think about. Be on the lookout for that in a couple of days' time. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Kaulig Nation. Ryan's at Yount Racing 45, and I'm at Sean Haven FE. Kaulig Nation, Dinger Nation, SVG Nation on Facebook. Put a smile on that face, and as Chris Rice says, believe. I'm doing my best, and we'll see you in the next video.